Poltergeist was released in 1982 and has since been cemented as one of the most iconic haunted house films of all time. It centers on a typical American family, the Freelings, who begin to experience a series of extraordinary and terrifying events inside their house. Starting, of course, with that unforgettable TV filled with white noise static. That TV acts almost like a portal, allowing spirits to cross into the living world, and soon after, things begin to move on their own. Before long, the youngest daughter, Carol Ann, is pulled into her closet and vanishes into another dimension. That is when the Freelings call in a team of paranormal experts to help bring her back. So I picked this movie for my 52-week horror movie challenge under the prompt to find a movie where a haunted house is the star of the film. This is actually one of the few entries in the entire challenge that I have seen before, but it has been so long that I remember very little beyond Carol Ann sitting in front of the TV, whispering, "They're here." That moment is burned into pop culture for a reason. It's simple, it is eerie, and it is instantly recognizable. Part of what makes Poltergeist feel so distinct is the powerhouse trio behind it all. Steven Spielberg, Kathleen Kennedy, and Frank Marshall. These three worked together on some of the biggest and best movies of the 80s and 90s. Now, I don't usually talk so much about producers, but this is a group that deserves attention, especially when it comes down to horror. Between Gremlins, Arachnophobia, and Poltergeist, they helped shape an entire era of accessible yet terrifying genre films. What's wild though is that Spielberg didn't just produce Poltergeist, he actually came up with a story and he co-wrote the screenplay. That's pretty rare. He's not typically thought of as writer. He's more of a director and producer. But the scripts that he has worked on are some of the most magical. I mean, think about Close Encounters of the Third Kind. In fact, if Close Encounters was Spielberg's take on alien mythology, Poltergeist is its spiritual cousin, his haunted house counterpart. Both movies blend supernatural wonder with genuine fear, and that combination makes Poltergeist stand apart from your typical horror film. Even though Tobe Hooper officially directed this movie, Spielberg's fingerprints are all over it. His knack for family dynamics and suburban Americana gives Poltergeist an immediate warmth before the horror actually starts to creep in. The Freelings themselves aren't just weird, dysfunctional, or gothic people, they're just normal. They're just normal, everyday folks, and that is what makes the story so effective. And the movie doesn't rush into the horror either. It starts with curiosity and even a little bit of humor. When the furniture starts to slide across the kitchen floor on its own, the family doesn't immediately scream or run away. They play with it. They treat the haunting like a fun mystery, moving the chairs around, testing it out, even laughing about it. It's such a clever human response, and it feels authentic. Of course, that light-hearted curiosity quickly dissolves once things turn darker, when the spirits stop playing and start attacking. If you watch Poltergeist today for the first time ever, I think if you're a modern horror fan, you won't be able to help but compare it to Insidious. And honestly, that's a fair comparison. Both revolve around a family whose child becomes trapped in another dimension with the help of paranormal experts and mediums guiding them throughout the process. The parallels are so freaking close that I actually had to go back and double check if Insidious was an official remake of sorts. It's not. But the filmmakers have openly acknowledged their love for Poltergeist, and the inspiration obviously shows. In a way, Insidious modernized Spielberg's concept for a newer generation, but there's still something timeless about how Poltergeist handled its supernatural lore. It doesn't rely too much on jump scares or modern editing tricks. Instead, it builds tension through visual storytelling, practical effects, and that eerie mix of family drama and ghost story that makes the haunting feel deeply personal. For a movie that came out in 1982, Poltergeist looks surprisingly good. The visual design, cinematography, and practical effects all work together to create a world that's unsettling but believable. That said, this film's special effects are kind of a mixed bag for me. When the movie relies on practical effects like moving furniture or the rotating room later on in the film, it's genuinely impressive, but when it shifts into more visual effects and optical composites, you can tell that it has aged a little bit. Take the ghostly hand that emerges from the TV. Looks a little bit cartoony by today's standards. Still, it is such an inventive idea that you kind of forgive the execution. The lighting, on the other hand, holds up beautifully. The film uses flickering lights and strobe effects to create unease. And while it might be a little bit much for anybody with light sensitivity, It undeniably adds to the tension and atmosphere. One of the most fascinating aspects of Poltergeist is how it taps into childhood fears. Spielberg and Hooper understand that horror doesn't have to come from monsters, it can come from the things that we grew up fearing in our own houses. The tree outside the boy's window, for example. It attacks him, which sounds absurd on paper, but visually it's striking and symbolically it's kind of genius. As a kid, you probably remember staring out at the trees during a storm, watching their branches move around like hands in the middle of lightning flashes, the shadows that would creep on the walls. That's exactly the kind of fear that this movie exploits. Then there's the closet. Every kid's nightmare, right? The place where monsters supposedly live. Having Carol Ann literally be sucked into the closet plays on that primal fear perfectly. And if that's not enough, later on in the movie, her brother gets dragged under his bed by a creepy clown doll. That is 3 classic childhood terrors rolled into one. Trees, closets, and clowns. It's like the filmmakers had a checklist titled Things Kids Are Afraid Of, and then they said, let's do all of it. The movie doesn't even just stop at childhood fears either. It also digs into adult anxieties, especially those surrounding technology. When Poltergeist first came out, television sets were becoming a central part of family life, but they also carried an undercurrent of paranoia. People worried about what the constant TV glow might be doing to their kids, and whether the device itself was changing how families interacted. Spielberg and Hooper used that paranoia really well. The idea of a ghost communicating through the television was both kind of futuristic and terrifying at the same time. I'm old enough to remember the white noise of TV sets and how those old rabbit ear antennas would pick up distant signals, which that would create an incredibly faint phantom image and possibly some sound as well. It would seem almost like there was indeed something going on hidden beyond that noise. And I'm sure that that created conspiracy theories and paranoia, including the age-old idea that there were cameras hidden inside the TV sets, watching and spying on you. Even though modern audiences might not connect so much to static on a screen anymore, the idea of technology separating families still hits hard. Today, it's not the TV doing it, it's phones, tablets, social media. The specifics change, but the fear remains the same. Poltergeist features some unforgettable visuals, even if not all of them work equally as well. The face-peeling nightmare sequence, for instance, is one that scarred audiences back in the 80s. It is grotesque. It is shocking, especially considering the movie was rated PG at the time, but obviously PG-13 didn't exist yet. Revisiting it now, the puppet head used for that effect looks a little bit too rubbery, kind of like that fake Arnold Schwarzenegger moment from The Terminator. Still, it's an iconic practical gag that shows how ambitious the effects team was. Then there's the rotating room sequence near the end of the film. Gravity fails, one of the characters is thrown across the walls and the ceiling, and we have seen this trick used before, numerous times. Nightmare on Elm Street, Inception, the list goes on and on and on, but it's always impressive. It's one of those practical setups that's not only effective, but also technically fascinating. And finally, the Hitchcockian hallway. You know the one, the corridor that seems to stretch endlessly as the camera zooms in. It's a classic dolly zoom trick, but it's executed with such precision that it creates real dread. It's a good example of how the movie uses cinematic language, not just spooky imagery, to unsettle the audience. I gotta say, you know, for a film that's almost 50 years old, it holds up remarkably well. Some of the effects are dated, obviously, and some of the pacing feels very early 80s, but the story, the themes, and the emotional beats still resonate. You can see its influence on everything from Insidious to The Conjuring to Stranger Things. In the end, Poltergeist remains a landmark horror film, one that bridges the gap between supernatural chills and family adventure. It's the perfect blend of Spielberg's sense of wonder and Hooper's horror instincts, and it deserves its reputation as one of the greatest haunted house movies ever made. At the end of the day, I'm gonna give this a score of 80 out of 100 possible stars. That's a B+ letter grade. Sure, a few effects haven't aged very gracefully, but most of Poltergeist still feels fresh and imaginative. It's the rare ghost story that's both heartfelt and terrifying, managing to tap into fears that are universal, whether you're afraid of the dark, of losing your child, or of what might be waiting just beyond that flickering TV screen. But that's all I got for you guys. Tell me your thoughts about Poltergeist in the comments section down below. Is this a film that you consider to be super iconic, one of the best haunted house horror films that you've ever seen? If not, what is your favorite haunted house film? Let me know, and as for YouTube, you guys know what to do. Hit the like, subscribe button, and bell to be notified when I come out with my next review, whenever and whatever that may be on. And until that day comes, peace out.